And we are live. Hello and welcome to today's live stream. We are going to be covering chapter 20, which will cover World War II from 1941 to 1945. And this chapter is going to be divided into three sections. The first section is called Arsenal of Democracy. It will cover the first 2 years of the war from 1941 to 1942. Then Section 2 is called Allies Strike Back from 1942 to 1944. And then Section 3 is going to be called Final Victory from 1944 to 1945. And if you want to follow along on our website, you can at www.tarpeia.us. Tarpeia is spelled Tarpeia.us. And this is chapter 20 of the compendium, which is this online library of primary source documents and events organized in this interactive timeline, which I will be summarizing today. So let's go into the first section, Arsenal of Democracy. FDR's third inaugural address framed the global crisis as a moral struggle against tyranny, warning that American freedom could not survive in a world dominated by force and committing the nation to active resistance even before formal entry into war. Through Lend-Lease, strategic planning conferences, and the Atlantic Charter's promise of collective security, self-determination, and economic cooperation, the United States positioned itself as the industrial and ideological arsenal of the Allied cause. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, and European Axis powers declaring war shattered isolationism, prompting sweeping war powers for the president, the Declaration of the United Nations, in which Allied governments pledged to employ all resources against the Axis, renounce separate peace, and uphold the principles of the Atlantic Charter, and a rapid mobilization of American industry and manpower for a two-ocean war. Early months brought severe Allied setbacks, including the Battle of Java Sea and the Bataan Death March, underscoring the vulnerability in the Pacific and the high cost of unpreparedness. That tide began to turn with the battles of the Coral Sea and Midway, where American naval and intelligence victories halted Japanese expansion and paved the way from defense to counteroffensive. So we begin with FDR's third inaugural address, and we have a video of FDR giving that address, the audio of it, at least. Now, the U.S.-British conference, where they will negotiate the Lend-Lease policy between the United States and Britain. U.S. v. Darby, Supreme Court case. You have the Lend-Lease Act, passed during the U.S.-British conference, gave the president discretion on sending massive amounts of aid to allied nations. You have FDR's speech on the Lend-Lease Act. HMS Hood is sunk by the Bismarck from 10 miles away in the Denmark Strait. Bismarck sent up a wall of plunging fire, which penetrated the weak deck armor of HMS Hood. The Hood's magazines exploded, sinking the Royal Navy's largest vessel in just 6 minutes. So here's an image of the Hood burning in the distance. It's not a clear image. And then shortly later, the Bismarck is sunk. And here's an image from a distance of the Bismarck sinking. You have FDR's fireside chat on the unlimited national emergency. So even before Pearl Harbor, the United States is preparing to go to war. You have Operation Barbarossa, which is the invasion of the Soviet Union by Nazi Germany, despite them having a neutrality pact, the Stalin-Ribbentrop Pact. Executive Order 8802. Forget what that one does. I'll have to add more descriptions to each of these events. Stone swears in as Chief Justice. This begins the Stone Court of the Supreme Court of the United States. We have the Atlantic Conference in August of 1941. The Atlantic Conference was a secret maritime or wartime meeting between between FDR and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill aboard naval vessels off the coast of Newfoundland. The two leaders issued the Atlantic Charter on August 14th, 1941, outlining shared Allied goals such as self-determination, free trade, collective security, and the post-war rejection of territorial expansion. Although the United States had not yet entered World War II, the conference marked a major step toward formal U.S.-British cooperation against the Axis powers and helped shape the ideological framework of the post-war international order. And so the conclusion of the Atlantic Conference was the Atlantic Charter, which was an 8-point charter that the United States and Great Britain will support. The U.S. destroyer Greer is sunk by German U-boat. The siege of Leningrad begins. This is part of Operation Barbarossa. FDR's fireside chat number 18 on the Greer incident. You have the Caviar Conference. The Battle of Moscow begins in October of 1941 and will continue until January 1942. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, which happened on the morning of December 7th, Hawaii time. The Imperial Japanese Navy launched a surprise aerial assault on a U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, aiming to cripple the Pacific Fleet and prevent American interference in Japan's planned expansion across the Pacific. In just under 2 hours, Japanese bombers and torpedo planes sank or damaged 8 battleships, destroyed or damaged nearly 200 aircraft, killed over 2,400 Americans, and wounded more than 1,000 others. The attack shocked the United States, unifying public opinion and prompting Congress to declare war on Japan the following day, bringing America fully into World War II. Roosevelt gives his Day of Infamy speech, which we have a video of that you can watch. I think this is one of his best speeches. You have FDR's fireside chat on the war with Japan. You have FDR's war message to Congress about Germany and Italy. U.S. declaration of war with Nazi Germany. Declaration of war with Italy. Then you have the War Powers Act of 1941. Shortly after U.S. entry into World War II, Congress passed this statute, giving the president massive authority to reorganize the executive branch and government agencies for war mobilization. The act authorized reorganization of executive departments and government corporations to meet wartime needs. In effect, the statute deepened wartime centralization of authority, enabling the president to remake administrative structures to better prosecute the war. You have the Arcadia Conference. The Arcadia Conference was a crucial wartime meeting held in Washington, D.C., where FDR and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill spent several weeks in close coordination immediately after the United States entered World War II. Unlike earlier diplomatic encounters, Arcadia was not a symbolic summit, but an intensive working conference in which the two leaders and their staffs established a unified Anglo-American strategy for defeating the Axis powers, agreeing on the Germany First policy that prioritized the war in Europe over the Pacific theater. During the conference, Roosevelt and Churchill also oversaw the creation of the Combined Chiefs of Staff, a permanent joint military command structure that coordinated strategy between U.S. and British forces for the duration of the war. The meeting solidified not only military cooperation, but also laid the groundwork for the United Nations, reflecting their shared vision of a post-war international order built on collective security. Japan captures Hong Kong and southern China. The declaration by the United Nations. This is not yet the United Nations that we all know and, I guess, love, but this is just the United Nations of the Allied nations. You have FDR's 1942 State of the Union Address, Executive Order 9066. I believe this is the one with Japanese internment. FDR's Fireside Chat number 20 on the progress of the war. You have the Battle of Java Sea, a decisive Japanese victory. The War Powers Act of 1942, passed on March 27th of that year, expanded presidential authority over the domestic economy and government operations, enabling the president to reorganize executive agencies, allocate materials, control production, censor communications, suspend certain contract requirements, and streamline wartime administration. You have the infamous Bataan Death March, FDR's Fireside Chat on sacrifice, encouraging Americans to change their way of life that best suited the war effort. So, not eating so much, recycling, donating, buying war bonds, not using energy or fuel as much, anything that will help the war effort. You have the Battle of Coral Sea, and the Battle of Midway, which is the turning point in the Pacific, where the United States at first was losing, but now with these two battles, they are winning. And the Battle of Midway will conclude this section, Arsenal of Democracy. The next section is called Allies Strike Back. So this is after the initial expansion of territory by the Nazis and the Japanese, and also, I guess, the Italians. And now the world has halted their advance. The Nazis are halted by the Soviets during the failure of Operation Barbarossa, and the Japanese were halted at the Battle of Coral Sea and Midway. And so now it's time for the Allies to strike back. In the Second Washington Conference, Allied leaders committed to a coordinated global strategy that prioritized defeating Germany first, while launching sustained offensives to halt and reverse Axis momentum on every front. In the Pacific, the United States seized the initiative through Guadalcanal and a grinding campaign of attrition across the Solomon Islands and New Guinea. While Allied victories at Al Alamein and Operation Torch marked the first major defeats of Axis armies in North Africa, the surrender of Axis forces in Tanzania and the invasion of Italy shattered the myth of Axis invincibility, even as brutal fighting in Salerno, Anzio, and Monte Cassino exposed the high cost of coalition warfare and strategic compromise. By June 1944, with Rome liberated, Allied forces stood poised for a decisive assault in Western Europe, having transformed the war from desperate defense into an inexorable advance. You have the Second Washington Conference, and then you have the Second Claridge Conference, and then the Barcelona Conference. They have all these conferences to make the war plans for the Allies. There's a lot of planning in war, especially World War. You have the Battle of Stalingrad, which begins in August of 1942. FDR's Fireside Chat, November 22nd, on inflation and progress of the war. FDR's Fireside Chat number 23 on the home front. You have the Churchill Conference, and you have Operation Torch. Operation Torch launched on November 8th, 1942. It was the first major Allied amphibious invasion of World War II, targeting French North Africa, which is Morocco and Algeria, with American, British, and Free French forces under the overall command of General Dwight D. Eisenhower. Its goal was to gain control of North Africa, open a second front against Axis forces, and prepare for an invasion of southern Europe, while also relieving pressure on the Soviet Union. The operation succeeded after initial resistance from the Vichy French forces, leading to their eventual cooperation with the Allies, the securing of North Africa, and the decisive victory over German and Italian forces at the Battle of Tunisia in May of 1943. Casualties were relatively light compared to later campaigns, with roughly 480 Allied dead and 720 wounded, and about 1,350 Axis and Vichy French dead, but its outcome marked a turning point that gave the Allies their first foothold in the European theater. You have Wickard v. Filburn, a Supreme Court decision, very important one, I think. FDR's 1943 State of the Union address, Casablanca Conference, now that Morocco is in Allied hands. At the Potengi River Conference to get the nations of South America to join the war on the side of the Allies. Yeah, the Battle of Bismarck Sea. The Bermuda Conference. Again, a bunch of conferences, a bunch of war conferences. FDR's Fireside Chat, number 24, on the coal crisis. You have the Trident Conference, Axis Surrender of North Africa, West Virginia State Board of Education v. Barnett, a Supreme Court decision, Battle of Kursk, Operation Husky, which is the invasion of Sicily. Mussolini is overthrown by the Italian government in July of 1943. FDR will give a fireside chat, number 25, which talks about the fall of Mussolini. You have the Quebec Conference, Operation Avalanche, which is the invasion of Italy. FDR's fireside chat, number 26, on the armistice with Italy and the Third War Loan Drive. Italy declares war on Germany. So now the Italians switch in 1943. Following the overthrow and arrest of Benito Mussolini in July and Italy's armistice with the Allies on September 8th, 1943, the Kingdom of Italy formally declared war on Germany, marking a dramatic reversal of alliances in World War II under King Victor Emmanuel III and the government of Marshal Pietro Badoglio. That's it. Italy shifted from being a core Axis power under Mussolini to a co-belligerent fighting alongside the Allies against former German allies who had rapidly occupied much of northern Italy and central Italy. This declaration reflected Italy's internal collapse, the division of the country into Allied-controlled south and German-occupied north, and the beginning of a brutal civil conflict within Italy itself during the broader struggle of World War II. At the Cairo Conference, Egypt, then you have the Tehran Conference in Iran, FDR's fireside chat number 27 on the Tehran and Cairo conferences, FDR's 1944 State of the Union, his 28th fireside chat, which summarizes the State of the Union. You have Battle of Monte Cassino, a multi-month-long fight in Italy, preceded the fall of Rome. And then FDR gives his address, his 29th fireside chat on the fall of Rome. And this will conclude this section of the chapter of this war. Now we go to the third and final chapter, or third and final section of this chapter, which is called Final Victory from 1944 to 1945. The Allied invasion of Normandy on D-Day opened a decisive Western front that, together with the Soviet advance from the east, crushed Nazi Germany through a campaign of liberation, encirclement, and attrition. As Paris was freed and the Germans launched their final counter-offensives in the Ardennes, Allied air and industrial superiority ensured that Axis resistance collapsed under the weight of overwhelming force. In the Pacific, American forces advanced through island-hopping campaigns, culminating in the devastating battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, and a strategic bombing campaign that shattered Japan's war capacity. The war ended with Germany's unconditional surrender in May of 1945 and Japan's capitulation after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, marking the total defeat of the Axis and the emergence of the United States as a global superpower and, at this time, the only nuclear power. You have the Order of the Day by Eisenhower. So I have a video of his speech, or not. He does have a radio address of a speech, but he also hands out these one-page, I guess, pamphlets to all of his soldiers for them to read it. And this is to encourage the soldiers to fight, given that June 6th is D-Day. And on D-Day, FDR will give a radio address. This is going to happen around the same time as D-Day, or as the actual invasion is occurring, where FDR will give a prayer, radio address prayer to the soldiers. This begins the Battle of Normandy. You have FDR's fireside chat number 30, opening the Fifth War Loan Drive. The first V-1 missile hits London on June 13th, 1944. You have the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the Bretton Woods Conference to work on getting rid of, I believe it was the gold standard, but not yet. No, to establish the gold standard, the U.S. gold standard. FDR's acceptance speech for his fourth term, to run for his fourth term. Battle of Leyte Gulf. FDR's election, he wins over Thomas Dewey. Battle of the Bulge. Korematsu v. United States, an important Supreme Court decision on Japanese citizenship and internment. FDR's 1945 State of the Union address. FDR's fourth inaugural address. At the fire bombings of Dresden, which happened on February 13th to the 15th of 1945. At the Battle of Iwo Jima, which is this background image, and also where this flag raising happened. Have FDR's address to Congress about the Yalta Conference. Have the firebombing of Tokyo, which happens on March 9th to the 10th, 1945. Have the Battle of Okinawa. FDR dies on April 12th, 1945, and Truman is sworn in as president. The Battle of Berlin, So this is the Soviets attacking Berlin. The United States has not yet reached Berlin. Mussolini is executed and is hanging. I won't show the image for too long on YouTube. I'm not sure if YouTube will appreciate that kind of image being shown. Oh, also, this might not be a good topic for YouTube. Germany surrenders on May 7th, 1945. And on May 8th, Truman announces victory in Europe. So he gives this address. I only have video for the first part. You have the UN Charter to establish the United Nations. You have the Trinity test, first successful nuclear bomb test. You have the Potsdam Conference, official order to drop the atomic bomb. The Bretton Woods Agreement Act to establish the United States as world currency, as the world reserve currency. Then you have the atomic bombings of Hiroshima on August 6 at 8:16:02 a.m., which was 7:16:02 p.m., August 5th, in U.S. Eastern Standard Time. At 8:16:02 a.m. Hiroshima time, the atomic bomb. Oh, that's a misspelling. Little boy detonates in a fraction of a second later. The fireball reaches a maximum of 900 feet in diameter. Temperatures on the ground reach 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Buildings melt and fuse together. Human and animal tissue is vaporized. The blast wave travels at 984 miles per hour in all directions, demolishing over 2/3 of Hiroshima's buildings in a massive expanding firestorm. 80,000 people are instantly killed or grievously wounded. Over 100,000 more will die from the bomb's effects in the coming months. And so Truman announces in this video the bombing of Hiroshima. The USSR declares war on Japan right after the first atomic bomb. And the USSR will invade Japanese Manchuria in Operation August Storm. And then you have the second bombing of Nagasaki. This is the Fat Man explodes 1,650 feet above the city, and between 40,000 to 75,000 people die instantly. The bomb creates a blast radius of 1 mile wide. The geography of Nagasaki prevents destruction on the same scale as Hiroshima, yet nearly half the city is obliterated. Hirohito, the Emperor of Japan, pleads for peace to his government. Hirohito's radio announcement of surrender. And the occupation of Japan begins. First U.S. personnel landed at Atsugi, Kanagawa Prefecture, around 9 a.m. on August 28th, 1945, Japanese time, a few days after Japan announced its surrender. And then the official instrument of surrender was signed on September 2nd, 1945, ending World War II, which arguably Japan started. I know a lot of people think about World War II beginning with Germany invading Poland, but years before that, you had the Japanese invasion of China. So I think the Japanese and the Germans both started World War II. I don't think it's one over the other. I think they both did it. And this will conclude the this chapter. This is the fourth and final chapter of the World Wars era. This is chapter 20 of the entire compendium. And I will be taking a break tomorrow, but the next day I will be covering the first chapter of the Cold War era, chapter 21. And that chapter will cover the administrations of Truman and Eisenhower from 1945 until 1961. So stay tuned for that live stream, and I hope you guys learned something new of our old history. We're getting pretty close to the modern day. We still have another 6 chapters. So the Cold War era consists of 3 chapters, chapters 21, 22, and 23. 21 is containment, 22 is détente, and 23 is rearmament. And then the modern era consists of 3 chapters: End of History, which is the 90s, War on Terror, which is the 2000s, and first half of the 2010s. And now the current chapter that we're living in is chapter 26, The Crisis of Populism, from 2017 till today. So we're getting pretty close to the end. It's been it's been a long month. I've been doing these live streams almost every day, covering all of the material that we include. And although there's not that much material in this chapter, I'll just since it's only been 30 minutes, I'm going to give you a sneak peek into the next chapter, which has a lot more material in terms of primary sources and events. And this chapter is nothing compared to the next chapter, Détente, which has ton more materials. I mean, this is probably going to take me 2 hours to get through all of this material. And so, yeah, there's a lot of history to cover. And I will be updating these timelines. And so if there's anything in the timelines that you see missing, just let me know, and I'll be more than happy to add it to the timeline, especially if it's a primary source document, a speech from the president, any president, or a speech from a member of Congress, or an important act or a Supreme Court decision. Any of these primary source documents that you think would be important, or that schools around the country require students to read, just let me know, and I'll be more than happy to add it to the compendium. So thank you for watching, and oh, by the way, this website, you guys can get to it. It's free, no advertisements, no paywall or anything like that. It's www.tarpeia.us. Tarpeia is spelled TARPEIA.us. And this compendium is a free resource anyone can use. And just go pick an era and then pick a chapter, and then you can view the materials that we have. And so this has been chapter 20. Thank you for watching. If you're here, hope to see you for the next live stream in 2 days. And yeah, thank you for being here, and have a nice day.